Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Imran Ahmed. I'm CEO of the Centre for Countering Digital Hate. Thank you so much for joining us today. And today we're honoured to be speaking with the creative team behind the new documentary, Brianna, A Mother's Story. Director Ewan Roberts and production manager Joanna Lewis. I watched the documentary a couple of nights ago, and I wrote to one of my staff and said, thank you for giving me the opportunity to watch that. But oh my Lord, it just left me shaken and devastated at the end of it, especially as a parent. And these are some of the greatest nightmares any parent can have. But before we dive in, for those who haven't seen the film yet, can you please start us off with a brief overview of the movie, Ewan?
Yeah, it's a sort of feature documentary in two parts, I suppose. It's telling, or three parts. It's telling the viewers about Brianna Jai, a sort of a young woman who, as many teenagers going through changes in her life, becoming an adult and dealing with the trials of modern life in an online world, being stuck in a room during COVID, and also a terrible crime that happened to her. She was murdered by two 15-year-olds. One was a apparent friend of hers, and another person she never met. And then the other part of the film is her mother and her family dealing with that terrible, awful crime, unpacking Brianna's life, and the story of her mother, Esther Jai, a remarkable lady who takes on the grief and focuses on making the world, trying to make the world a better place, trying to sort of reduce violence and also online harm. Both those things Brianna sort of was victim of, really. So we've tried to put that into a sort of a 90-minute film, and hopefully we've done justice to those elements of the story and justice to Brianna and to Esther and the family.
Thank you. I mean, watching the movie, it's clear it's made with such compassion and love and understanding. And there's a bit of me that just feels that there has to be a personal dimension to this for each of you. So, what drew each of you personally to Brianna's story? Why did you feel it was so important to tell it now?
Go on, Joe. I've spoken, so you can start this one.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been working with Yuan on quite a few docs over the past couple of years. So we were we'd already formed a bit of a docs team, the two of us, with the help of other producers that kind of were coming on various programs that we were making. But for me, I'd kind of expressed that I wanted to really work on this particular documentary because I'm really passionate about inclusion and about safe spaces for minorities. And this particular subject, like I've done lots of work for ITV, for their staff networks, for example. Like I helped look after their Pride network for quite a while. And for me, it was like I really wanted to work on, I love working on shows that are meaningful and that I feel like I can really help raise awareness to audiences on the importance behind creating those safe spaces for underrepresented groups. And obviously the story about Brianna is so harrowing, and it really touched a community that I'm really passionate about when it comes to inclusion. And I really wanted to help do her story justice and do her justice because she's an amazing person. And I feel like with this particular topic around safe spaces online, I feel really passionate about making sure that we're directing our young people to the right places, because it's so like online worlds can be so just so terrifying. So for me, yeah, I'm really proud of what was created, and yeah, really pleased that I was able to be a part of it.
And yeah, and many of those elements are for me as well. It's as a parent, you touched on it then. When you sort of introduced us, it's that fear of what world we bring children into. When I was in school, gosh, any kind of bullying would stop at the gate of the school. You'd go home. That would be your safe space. But now, if you're young, there is no safe space. The internet, those apps, that they come into your bedroom all the time, and being able to tell Brianna's story and Esther's story in a meaningful way that has an impact, that will help resonate with those who view. We really hope that we contribute to the conversation, to contribute to some kind of solution or some kind of way of making the world a safer place, which is what Esther wants to do and is doing, and your organisation, and as program makers, as TV people, it's the essence of why we come into this job. You want to sort of contribute and make a small difference in some way.
That's such a powerful point about the way that the pressures and the dynamics of school relationships are brought into home time, which is meant to be a safe space. And I remember when things were rough at school, when you're having an argument with a friend, or things aren't going well for you, it was always that you go home and everything sort of resets for a few hours, and then you're back to the fray the next day. And I think that 14 to 24 in psychology is the transition to adulthood. It's those critical years where you're not being socialized by your parents primarily, you're not being socialized yet by a partner primarily, you're being socialized by each other, and it's this kind of that really febrile moment in our development. We're constantly looking at where we stack up against other people, what our position is in society, starting to establish those relationships and norms that will be crucial for our adult life. And those pressures can be really intense. I think there's two elements here. One, they're accelerated by social media. And second, now they're brought back into the home space, which was always the space in which you could reset, take a breath in between that really, complex, dynamic, emotional process of growing up and working out how you fit in. And with Brianna, that's particularly important because of her, that she was exploring her identity as well.
Yeah.
But the film explores how Brianna and other young people featured in it were affected by what they encountered online. And I just wonder if there's anything that you discovered or uncovered during production about the role of social media in their lives that surprised you, and its particular role in this tragedy.
Yeah, I think for Brianna, it was two sides of it, really. I think during COVID, and she was transitioning, she was able to sort of reach out and find her people, I think, online, which is such a positive thing that possibly she couldn't do in the community in the real world. And then she started creating content, makeup videos and stuff, and that gave her an outlet to be who she was as Brianna. But also the other side was that she would get hateful messages and directed towards her, and also she was looking for videos to do with weight loss, and that sort of the algorithms fed anorexia content and that kind of content, which sort of had an effect on her mental health. So it was a huge world that, and positive and negative things that affected her, which was unfettered. There was no way of reducing that content. It's all open for her, in the positive and negative side. And, and I know, Joe, it is a positive world out there for people looking for people of similar, to talk with and to sort of experience it, which is such a good thing. And that, that's to be championed. But also that negative element is something that's so difficult to police, isn't it?
Yeah, you see so much hate online. That's the thing, and it's like it's young people can access spaces that, technology is moving so quickly that they're able to access spaces before we even know that they even exist. So it's really hard to police what young people are finding and looking at. And you've got the dark web out there, which young people are managing to access, and we haven't got a clue, how to find, to find the resources that they're finding. So I suppose, I feel passionate about directing young people to the right spaces. So, Brianna found some amazing friends online, and that's really important, that people are using the online world to find like-minded voices and allies and friends. Because obviously when you are in a minority, it's hard to find like-minded people that understand what you're going through. It's such a small percentage of the population that are trans, for example. So, it's those, and when you kind of find those online spaces and you find those worlds, you actually, you go to, you can feel like you're a majority, or you can feel like you're not battling kind of, not just being trans, but going through all sorts of different issues as a young person. You can find your people, and you can feel that actually you fit into society. You can find your people. It can help you can become more confident when you surround yourself with people that really understand what you're going through. But then in the same breath, as Yuan said, you can also find people that you think accept you, but also might be quite dangerous, or they might be using your content and sharing it into the wrong spaces, or you don't know who you're talking to. It could be, someone with a completely different, pretending to be someone completely different to who they are. And it's really quite dangerous. So it's really hard to monitor it, especially young people, like I say, who can access worlds that we have no idea, where they're accessing.
And what was really shocking, I'm in my 40s when I remember, people talking about video nasties and having an influence on young children back in the 90s. But now there is no filter for content for young people, filter the content young people are getting. And one of the figures that really, really frightened me was there was a huge survey, I think the Youth Endowment Fund did, of half of all teenagers seeing extreme content on social media, which, that's a huge number of young people seeing material that helps shape their minds. You said between 14 and 24 is that period where young people are sort of developed into adults. So if they're exposed to, violent content, many of it violence towards women, that surely has an effect on those young people. And how do you deal with that? In the modern age, it's a really big question to answer.
And then obviously then you've got the algorithms. As soon as you start seeing, as soon as you start being provided with clips like that, they'll just get worse and worse. And then you find that they're kind of coming to you. It's not like you have to go out and search for them. So you just imagine what young people are automatically having coming into their Instagram or whatever social media account they're using. It's coming to them automatically.
You sound like my researchers right now. It's so interesting what you say, because of course, social media. I remember moving to America during the pandemic in June 2020, and I was on my own. I had 2 suitcases, and it was me in an apartment in DC, and I had left all my friends behind, my family in Manchester, my friends in London, and around the country, around the world. And we were, of course, isolated, so we couldn't speak to people, see each other properly. Yeah. And it was a really profoundly important mechanism for community and self-actualization. Yeah. And that's what we're talking about with Brianna, right? It was a vector for her to discover herself in that crucial period of her growth. But then at the same time, to be harangued and harassed and abused. And when we did a study called Deadly by Design, where we set up accounts on TikTok for 13-year-old girls in 4 different countries, US, UK, Canada, Australia. And we then recorded what the algorithm fed those accounts. So without any intervention, in the first 2.6 minutes, they were getting self-harm content. In the first 8 minutes, eating disorder content, every 39 seconds on average. And when you name the account something like, so instead of naming the account Susan, you name it Susan Lose Weight. Those accounts that showed vulnerability, they got 3 times as much of the dangerous content, 12 times as of the suicide content, the self-harm content.
Gosh.
So
that's so shocking.
It
That's
really is. And so like that, these are phenomena that are really, I mean, gosh, what are we doing to our kids? Like, yes, community is important. Yes, self-actualization is vital in establishing their identities. But those 14 to 24. The reason I was studying them back in the day was because I worked for the Shadow Youth Justice Minister.
Yeah.
So, we were looking at criminogenicity, the first-time offending, and 14 to 24, the critical years of first-time offending. And of course, we've got on the other side not Brianna, but the people who murdered her.
Yeah, Eddie and Scarlett. And they were being shaped by what they were looking at as social media. A lot of that content was on the dark web, but also other content on social media. It was shaping their minds to act out fantasies, of what they wanted to do. And it's difficult to sort of do that direct connection, but it is suggested that there's a connection there.
And you know what's scary
in that young age.
Sorry, Ewan. I was going to say, it's scary as well that when you see content online or you see comments that are hateful and you try and report them, it's just an automated system that comes back to you. And quite often the content doesn't get deleted.
Yeah.
And it's so frustrating because you can see something is so traumatic and young people will be reading it, or people will be reading it that really shouldn't be seeing it. And it's not like the words aren't, being flagged as hateful, and it just feels like the whole system it's too automated to be able to like it's like it needs sort of manually like kind of viewing and proper. I don't know how. I mean, you probably know better than what I do, but I just think the amount of times I've tried to report content and it just doesn't go anywhere.
And we've been studying that for 5 years. We have something called the Failure to Act series, where we go and report the most egregious violations of their own rules, and then go and check what action they take. And you're right, nearly every single time the numbers are about 90+% is left standing of extreme self-harm, extreme violence. So look, I mean, one of the people that you spoke to in the movie is a friend of mine, Arturo Bejar, who is a former insider for Meta. I spent a lot of time with him in Oakland, California, where he's based, and at conferences around the world.
He's a very special man.
He's
a
great.
brave man.
Yeah, and so motivated, and for such beautiful reasons. Reasons, because of his own journey as a parent. Which I really identify with. Tell me, why did you feel it was important to include his perspective in the film?
I think for us, we spent a great deal of our production time trying to get social media companies to meet with Esther. She really genuinely wanted to meet them and get a sense of what are they doing, why aren't they doing more, and how her daughter was getting this content, so much of it. And we weren't getting responses from them. They weren't willing to meet with her. So we thought, well, it's important that she does talk to someone who knows how they work, and Arturo was willing and gave up so much of his time to talk with us. And that's why we wanted to get a sense of, it was such an important part of the story because it sort of, it shaped who Brianna was in a positive and negative sense. And we wanted to get a better idea from someone who knows, from working inside Meta. Arturo could give us that, and was willing to do that really. And I think his interview is probably one of the most powerful interviews I've been part of, who's so honest and so knowledgeable, and he's an engineer, and his research, I think it was something like 1 in 8 children would get sexually harassed every week via Instagram, and when he took his concerns up the chain, nothing happened. And that's shocking. That's shocking to hear that, and as you say, Imran, he was doing it for the right reasons, as a parent, and I can sort of, really empathize with those really positive reasons for doing that, and then nothing happened, and he now is doing what he can outside of that company to see if he can cause some change.
Yeah. Look, at CCDH, we research this sort of stuff day in, day out. But we also try to change the system, and we are essentially a mechanism for creating costs to social media companies for the production and distribution of hate and disinformation. That's our model. We want to create real-world economic costs, whether it's regulation, litigation, or the market. Advertisers, 90+% of their revenues are advertising. But I want to know from you, what conversations are you hoping that this film will spark, particularly around tech accountability and online safety?
Yeah, what we hope by making this film is that it gave Esther the opportunity to reach out to sort of, people in power. She's had conversations with the Prime Minister in the past, and her message of hope and change for good is sort of reached out there, really, and because of her personal story, that people can learn from that, and things can be added to legislation, to pressure on social media companies to put things in place to make a difference. Arturo said himself, I think it would take no more than 1 year to create a product that's safe for young people to use with that content. And to hear that from someone who knows is shocking. And why? Why isn't it happening? And that's what's the question that Esther was asking. And she's asking that all the time now, really, as well.
It's a question I ask myself a lot. I started CCDH about 8 years ago. I was a colleague of Jo Cox, the 41-year-old mother of two and the MP for Batley and Spen, who was murdered by a far-right terrorist who had in part been radicalized online. And I was actually Alan Johnson's special advisor for the referendum, and who was leading the campaign for Labour. And I quit the party, I quit politics, and started studying online radicalization. This is when people didn't see this stuff happening, and social media, the discourse about how great it was, and how Mark Zuckerberg's like cool young guy from Silicon Valley who's making the world better. But I went to meet with the platforms, and it took me 2.5 years of talking to them to realize that they got it. They did. They got it at a technical level. They got it at an emotional level. They got why it was bad, but they were also making so much money from it that they couldn't possibly change the way it operates, unless they were forced to do so. And that's when I launched the organization to say, okay, if it's making too much money, how can we make it less profitable? Which is the classic way that you regulate industries, is you basically create costs for the harms they produce, and then force them to essentially change the way they operate. Look,
and the moral question, when you were talking, sorry, when the morality of young people being harmed because of the product they have, and they could make it safer. What reaction did you get when you were speaking to them? Is the economic argument so much stronger that the other arguments go out the window?
Yeah, and think about the structure of capitalism. A CEO, and I'm a CEO of a non-profit. I have a fiduciary duty to my. I don't have shareholders, but I have a board who make sure that I spend the money given to us by donors in the correct way. For a profit-making company, they have a fiduciary duty to shareholders to maximize shareholder revenues. And so, if every child, as Meta calculated, is worth $270 over their lifetime to them, their job is to maximize that number by keeping them on platform for as long as possible, and to grow the number of users. And so it's a simple equation for them. It's number of users, time spent on platform. and then advertising revenue per minute or per second, per impression that they're on the platform. So if you can maximize those three numbers, and anything that gets in the way is actually doing a disservice to your shareholders. So it's the one thing you can be fired for if you're a CEO, or you will get fired if you diminish shareholder value. Now, what would happen in a rational system is they would say, we have to be careful about harming kids and making them kill themselves, because if that happens, we're gonna be sued crazy. You know, like in a deli, why do you take care of, like, health and safety? Why do you make sure you're wearing gloves? You don't.
It's risk assessment, isn't it? You should be risk assessing,
right?
Yeah.
So, but the problem is in America that there's something called Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act 1996, which immunizes platforms from any liability for any harm generated on their platform. And the European Union had the same rules with the e-commerce directive. So, because there's zero cost for causing harm, and if you try and fix the harm, you actually make the product less profitable because it's less addictive. There's less content on there. So actually, your fiduciary duty is to ignore people complaining about the harm and focus on that. And I think, corporations are amoral. They, the people, I think the decisions that are taken are immoral, but corporations fundamentally are, they're an invented entity which has no id, no morality, there's no Jiminy Cricket on Meta's shoulder.
They don't have to be accountable, because for them, like you say, if they're not liable, then they're not. For them, they're not generating the content. The content's being generated on their platform, so it's like for them, they're not accountable in their minds, I suppose.
And it's that weight, isn't it? It's that PR weight against the harm, of negative publicity around their platforms. Is it worth it for us to change things?
I don't mean to be brutal, but shame is no longer enough. And, it doesn't affect them anymore. I've actually tracked over 8 years of doing this how actually shame's become a less effective tool. It was for a while, but it's not anymore. It has to be economic. And that's sort of the brutal reality of it. Now, look, in the UK, we have the Online Safety Act now. I was the first witness to give evidence to that committee in September 2021. That became law in October 23. We're in really active discussions with Ofcom about the implementation of the Act right now. And that's a mechanism for real costs. Like, if they cause harm, there are now mechanisms for costs, for the government, the regulator, Ofcom, imposing costs on them. But I wanted to know, like, what has the reaction been, both publicly but politically as well, for you guys since the documentary aired? Have any reactions really stood out to you?
We had huge positive coverage around it, long of press coverage around the documentary, and Esther did many interviews. And the feedback she got personally from various politicians has been hugely positive. And I hope that giving her sort of a higher profile has led for her to have conversations that have made a difference. I think from ITV's perspective, who commissioned it, they're very proud of that documentary and proud of the space they gave it. And it's something that, talk about corporations, about their corporate sort of way of working. It's something they want to sort of give space to, really. So overall, it's been hugely positive.
I'm really glad to hear that. It's a difficult watch. And me crying at something is not necessarily a sign of anything. I cry at everything. Paddington, I will. Like, you won't be able to talk to me for 20 minutes because I'll just be sobbing. But it made me feel such an incredible array of emotions, and joy at her finding community, like you said, and finding these people who loved her for who she was, and seeing her transition and actualize and understand who she was a little bit better. But then I remember the abject terror of being a teenager and not knowing where you fit in, and seeing that intensified for her to such an extent by technology. It really is a story that has so much inside it. And, for us as an organization, we've done work on LGBTQ plus hate in the past. It's, at CCDH, we stand with families like Brianna's Esther and continue fighting for safer online spaces. Just to the people who are watching, if this film moved you, we do encourage you to push for responsible tech reform and action by our governments and regulators. And you can follow our work at counterhate.com and share this film and tell people about this incredible movie. The question for you guys: where can viewers in the UK and the US see this film?
So it's available on ITVX, ITV's sort of online platform in the UK. No announcement yet on where in the US it will be available. I know the distributors are sort of having ongoing discussions, so watch this space for the moment.
Well, look, thank you so much. Thank you again, both of you, for your time, and for to everyone who's watching for being part of this really important conversation. And I just wish you guys the best with all the rest of the promotion for this movie. Thank you.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.